Thank you very much, Madam President, for your kind words. And may I reiterate everything that you said in terms of the achievement of those who are graduating today. It really is a wonderfully celebratory occasion, this, and I can see there's a positive warmth of glow of pride coming from the tiered seats behind you in the front. I have to be quite honest, I was taken aback by the, not just the preponderance, but the utter domination of womanhood in these ranks. I can only count 6 men amongst the 110 or whatever it is. And I don't know quite how that comes about, but it may be a sign of the way of the world tomorrow. So look out, lads. No, but I am, as you said, a lifelong supporter of CILEx, as one must now call it. In fact, started my legal life. First few years, I was really working with what used to be called managing clerks, far more than I was with solicitors. I learnt the major part of what I know about the law, and even more the practice of the law, which isn't the same, from old, wise, wonderful managing clerks. I actually started in the law 53 years ago as office boy in a Suffolk market town, a place called Sudbury. For a year and a quarter, I was the lowest of the low. But all I can say is that I learnt more in the first year and a quarter that I think I have in almost the 51 and a half years since. There's nothing like working at the bottom of the heap to understand how an office works, what makes it happy and unhappy, what motivates people, what demoralizes them. And above all, I think then I learnt my realization as to how vitally important the law is in the lives of so many of our fellow citizens. And as I shall say in a minute or two, it's even more the case today than it was then. The law wasn't nearly as intrusive back in the 50s as it now is. I need to congratulate CILEx on becoming CILEx. I think it was only this year that you actually received your charter. So that's it's a great year. And it was 120 years ago, I think, that your first group met in the Girdlers Hall, from which developed your organization. And I think it's rather funny that a group of men, as they were then, met in the Girdlers Hall. What the hell were they doing in the Girdlers Hall? But that's the fact of it. And of course, the other thing is that this is the first occasion on which the oath will be taken. And I have to say, I think it's a huge feather in the cap of CILEx that you were the first legal body in the country to adopt this way of bringing you, graduands, as you now are, into this professional body. I wish my own professional body, the Law Society, would have the courage and foresight to do as you're doing. But the fact that you're doing it and will do it now hereafter will be a great spur for them to follow suit. I need to say just a couple of things about, sort of apologies in advance. Some of what I'm going to say will strike you as nostalgic, and you're all amazingly young. All I can say is that whilst one mustn't be trapped in the past, there are lessons to be learnt from the past. And I do think that this great profession of ours is in a sort of crisis now, not widely recognized, but I think it is, as I shall explain in a minute. The other thing I want to say is that whatever I say in a few minutes, I do not for a second underestimate the difficulty that many of you are going to have in finding jobs. It's a rotten time to be entering the profession. There's no two ways about that. But I hope that you won't be discouraged, you won't give up, because things will improve, times will change, believe me. But don't anybody think that I'm unaware of circumstances for you. In fact, perhaps you could show here how many people are currently still looking for a position. Put a hand up. Well, that's staggering. I take all that back. I tell you this, if you were trainee solicitors who are just finishing, not half, I would say a quarter of the hands would go up, but that's wonderful. And it's one advantage for coming up through the ranks, that you have your roots and you have your place to go. The other thing I need to say is that I'm proud of this profession. Although I shall shortly make some critical remarks, some very critical remarks, I am proud to be a solicitor and a lawyer. And just as your president said, so should you be too. And then lastly, I want, again, because people like me are supposed to give advice to you young graduates, it's for you to decide what is important in your lives. And I didn't say in your legal lives, I said in your lives. Because I'm fed up of meeting young people who get the cart before the horse, who haven't really decided what is important to them as people, how they're going to balance their lives between work and non-work, between family and non-family, between money and non-money aspects of life. Until you've sorted that out, you're not in a position to determine what sort of future in the law that will best suit you and where you'll be most fruitful and fulfilled. So nothing I say, believe me, is to discourage you in making your own decisions, however eccentric other people may think them. And I must say, one aspect of being an old fart is that I really do miss eccentricity. The legal profession, when I entered it was a sort of harbinger of eccentrics. I mean, if I tell you that one of the two partners in this small general practice, there were, I think, 4 or 5 managing clerks and about 15 other staff. Before the days of intercom, because when I started there was nothing, there wasn't even an electric typewriter, let alone a photocopier, let alone all this modern stuff. And one of the two partners used to summon his secretary by discharging an 18th century pistol. And the whole office rocked. And you knew that Mr. Wells had summoned Ruby Farrance, as she was called. And this went on for some while, and Ruby, a spirited young woman, very humble background, but she went in, and Mr. Wells was quite a posh sort of chap, and he would spoke rather like this, and you know, he was colonel in the army in the war. And she said, "Cecil," because contrary to expectation, she called him by his Christian name, he called her Miss Farrance. She said, "Cecil, I'm fed up of you firing your bloody pistol. You're nothing more than a little boy." And she said, "If you fire it once again, I'm off." Well, of course, that's all he needed. As soon as he got back to her room, because he had a pair of these 18th century pistols, he always had one ready to go, and off it went. I was in the outer office, the office boy, and the clients were there, and they were, you know, in she went and didn't close the door, and they could all hear her say, "Right," she said, "that's it, I'm off. You're nothing but a bloody little boy." And with that, there was another explosion, and she'd picked up the other pistol and was waving it around in her excitement, and it pulled the trigger, unfortunately. And he had been hit by a bit of swabbing and hit his forehead, and the blood was spurting down off the end of his nose. She said, "My God, I've been shot, I've been shot." And she said, "I've shot Mr. Wells, I've shot Mr. Wells." And the clients in the front were getting up and said, "Nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about." And, you know, of course, she was gone, sacked. But the next day, by 11 o'clock, he was saying, "For goodness sake, somebody go and get Miss Farrance. I can't possibly do without her." And she was back by lunchtime. But, you know, you wouldn't get that in a modern solicitor's office. And more's the pity, really. No, I really do miss it. And the old managing clerks, oh God, they were, talk about wise, practical people. I remember one of them, even in those days, used to get rather poncy letters from big city practices, although remember that the biggest of them then only had 20 partners. That was the maximum by law. And he got this loan agreement, and it was the day before spell checks and all that stuff. And the crucial clause, the interest clause, said, and the borrower will pay interest at 7% instead of per annum. Unfortunately, the busy secretary had put per anus, which was, and he loved that, you see. And he called me and he said, look at this, Andrew, look at this. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. And he crossed out the NUS and put in NUM. And in the margin he wrote, my client is paying through the nose. Brilliant stuff. And that put him back in his box. And there was another legal executive I heard of at the time who apparently did divorce and family work. And this there was a young woman who was having real trouble with her new husband in the vicinity. And apparently she had a sort of an imagination that as soon as the husband attempted to have matrimonial rights, that there was somebody under the bed, and she, it's just complete figment. But anyhow, she went to see psychologists, went to Harley Street and so on, and somebody said, well, why don't you go and see old Smith? He said, what? Do you mean the managing clerk? Yes, he's very, very sensible, wise chap, Oh, for Pete's sake. Anyhow, he goes back, tells his daughter, and she at length thought, well, nothing to lose. Marriage was collapsing, goes to see old Smith. And he sits there very wisely, nods, tell me all about it, my dear. And she spilled out this tragic tale, how they hadn't yet consummated the marriage because of this awful figment in her mind. He said, I know what to do. He said, I think that what you should do is, you say this figure is hiding under the bed. Yes. Well, I think you just cut the legs off the bed, my dear. And today, by contrast, it's extraordinary where we've got to. Of course, we've got massive firms, because there's no limit now on how big they can be. And I had an occasion the other day where I met two partners. I won't mention the two firms because, well, why not? No, I won't. Anyhow, two of them I knew quite well and chatting away. And around the other corner came two more solicitors, one of whom was a partner in another of the big firms. I knew him too, and the other one I didn't know. And he came up, oh, hello, Andrew. I said, well, of course, you know each other. No. I said, well, let me introduce you. You're partners of the same firm. It's absolutely true. And that one of the things that's gone wrong with our profession is that it's become impersonal, bureaucratic, managerialist. People don't know their colleagues, much too big. And indeed now lawyering is becoming more transactional and less relationship. You don't have a client. And in the old days, you'd have them for life. And usually in the next generation as well, you have them for a transaction. And what a bloody stupid way of going about things that is, if I may say so. Perhaps I shouldn't swear in Bedford Corn Exchange, but it really does excite me, because the waste of time and so on by always starting with a clean sheet. And we're now so specialized, aren't we, that it won't be one person who has a clean sheet. There'll probably be 2, 3, 4. I had an occasion not all that long ago where I had 10 solicitors lined up when I asked for a meeting with the other side. There was me and 10 of them. And all that, I think that's our profession going the wrong way. And not only does it not serve the public and the clients, it doesn't, I believe, serve us, because the pleasure that one used to have, and still, pray God, still has in many of your firms, of the people you deal with, the people factor, for me a more important factor than the law, that is being chipped away at all the time, and we need to restore it, because most of us, let's face it, respond most to relationships and trust, and if you know someone well, not only can you advise them better, but you can have a joshing relationship with a sort of humor and fun in it that makes life worth living. And above all, of course, we're now driven by money. Well, lawyers have always been an unpopular breed. They've always been too interested in money, the public would say. But it's got to a high point now. They didn't even have time costing at all when I started in the law. It's now some firms 3-minute units you've got to account for. And the bigger firms get, the less personal, less organic they are, the more, I'm afraid, the money factor is the only thing that unites them. And that's a tragedy, because you can't, it's in the New Testament, you can't serve mammon and the public interest. And somehow we've got to break those shackles, because believe you me, unless you do, and I say you because you're the upcoming generation, you're going to be the people who determine how this profession of ours goes. And don't think that you're not. Don't think you're going to hide away somewhere and just do your little bit and then buzz off. That's not a way to fulfill the obligations and ideals of the profession you're joining today, let alone to meeting the dictates of the oath you're about to take. And this country is in a wider crisis, I believe, a really major, major crisis. It's not just about the financial system and the collapse of banks and all of that, although that's, heaven knows, bad enough. We have an ethical and moral and values crisis in this country, which is bizarre, given that we were once the cynosure of the world as being the most honorable, the most trustworthy, the most law-abiding, the most community-centered nation on the planet. And if this sounds too gloomy, it shouldn't. It's a challenge. I don't want to depress you. I want to challenge you. And if you look back across our island history, you'll find over the last 1,000 years there are probably 4, 5, 6 other junctures down those years where we've reached what looks like a sort of no way out crisis. We're about to go collectively over the cliff edge. And where enough of us have stood up just in the nick of the time and said, hey, this will not do. This is not a sustainable path we're on. The values we are not living by, the literally demoralization of the society of which we are citizens, has reached a point of no return, of self-destruction. And that's where we are. But the great thing about the Brits is that we do just learn in time. At the 11th hour, a wave of reaction comes about. And that's what's got to happen, and you have got to be leaders of it, both in wider society and within our profession. Don't get me wrong, our profession is still, there's very little crookery in it. Most people will not break the law at the behest of a client paying them lots of money. We haven't lost that central integrity, but we've lost so much else, and in particular, service of the public interest, service of poor people who can't any longer afford to pay the amazing fees we charge. Firms, the vast majority now, who do no legal aid at all, and I'm going back to the House of Lords after this ceremony to battle on in the legal aid bill. We're in a crisis, my friends, because there is no justice in a democracy unless it's available to poor and vulnerable people as well as rich and powerful ones. And without justice, give up. Don't call yourselves members of a profession. What the hell are we professing? If the large number of our fellow citizens can't get legal help when they need it, what are we professing? We're not professing justice, we're not professing fairness, we're not professing anything except getting more money in our pockets next year than this, and that's where we nearly are at. That is the crisis. And it's not even that it makes people happy. I've been in the city now since 1964, and I've seen the pleasure factor, if you like, the contentment, the fulfillment factor in big firms declining and declining and declining as they get richer and richer and richer. Because actually, we do often get more by giving than receiving. We do get huge satisfaction helping some poor old biddy over a stile that's otherwise going to topple on her and crush her, and doing it for little or nothing. And if the firms you're in aren't sympathetic to any of that, then get out. You only live once. It's no good getting to 65 or on your deathbed and saying, I wish I'd helped make the world a better place. This isn't a dress rehearsal. And you're powerful people in a world dominated by law. And that bizarre parliament that I'm going back to, we're now legislating at the rate of 13,000 pages of new law a year. Think of that. Well, you know it. The specialization we're subject to is a mark of it. There are over 40,000 statutes on the statute book. People have never, ever before been so dependent on us. If we turn our backs on them, or when they come through the door of the office, say, have you got £1,000 on account of costs? Because if you haven't, turn around and go out. We are living, I emphasize, in a sham democracy. We are living in a sham parliament. I said to my colleagues, I've said it several times, and they agree. What is the point of passing all this mass of laws if you don't allow people the means of accessing those rights, of protecting themselves against the overmighty? And now we have the bizarre situation where the rich, the over-rich, the people who don't pay their taxes, they can afford to hire fleets of lawyers, and they use the law as an instrument of oppression, as a sword and not a shield. Anyhow, I'm sorry, I've gone on too long and I've got too emotional, but what I see, you young people here, and the potential in you, and when I know as I do that unless you respond and spread your horizons and determine that you are going to contribute to the public realm, I don't know how, but somehow, whether it's through pro bono or doing some legal aid or don't ever forget it, you as lawyers are hugely valuable in your communities. You have skills and knowledge that would be massively valuable in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of places. Anyhow, a huge amount reposes in you, and all I can do is wish you Godspeed in your lives to come. I wish you fulfillment. You can have, and I'm sure will have, wonderfully fulfilled life. I've had a wonderful life in the law. Make yours wonderful too. And I congratulate CILEx, and above all, I congratulate you, and hope that your lives will be fruitful and useful and fulfilled. Thank you.